My decks. I just want to touch on my decks because I know that sort of landed in our laps, right? And all of a sudden, this is what we're doing. If you have gotten a decoration in my decks through the process and to us, we can't see it yet. So I just want you to know we want to help, but we can't see them yet. So I did have a chief, Chauvelin, I can't remember what wing, asked for some help. We looked and we don't see it. So we're going to look into that a little bit more. So just know that we're working through bugs too. And we want to help just as quickly as we can as well. That's my decks. I am going to go ahead and introduce Master Sergeant Durkins and Master Sergeant LaRose from the 105th. I did send out an evaluations, like I said at the beginning of the class today. I sent out the 101 video that we recorded. That's just a generic evaluations 101. Obviously not specific to my eval, but based on a lot of the questions that we're getting, we can tell we likely have a lot of newer program managers to the evaluation program. And so we felt it was necessary to just help with a training tool with basic evals knowledge. So I did send that out to all the FSS leadership on Monday. If you didn't receive that, please just go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Headquarters, do HQ ARPC in your search in your YouTube, not on your government computer. You have to use a commercial device for that. We use these platforms because they're just more mobile. They're more able for you to use them. Zoom has an app. You can use your personal phone. So I know sometimes it's difficult on your government computer, but you don't have to be sitting at your government computer to view our trainings. So that's why we've chosen those platforms. And then once things get a little more solidified, we'll go from there within myFSS and having tools in myFSS similar to how we have them currently in myPurse. We're just not there yet. So we're going to go ahead and pass it over. They're going to do a live demo. Are you all ready?
Hi, Chief. This is Sergeant Durkins. Thank you. I am. So good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm Sergeant Durkins, and myself and Master Sergeant LaRose are super excited to be here to kind of give you a CSS and MPF perspective on the myEval system. So hopefully you did have an opportunity to review the Eval 101 training that the chief mentioned was published. It does go, Sergeant LaRose does go into great detail on determining the static closeout dates for kind of every scenario that we could think of. And then I go into MilPDS and show you how to do the projections and how to pull some reports. So that's really the first part of myEval to ensure the data integrity and that the information is flowing appropriately to myEval. So if you're able to successfully do part 1, then the rest of part 2 in myEval should kind of flow a little seamlessly in theory. So if you want to log into myFSS and myEval and follow along with me, you're more than welcome to. That way, if you hit any roadblocks, you can certainly put the question in on the chat and Sergeant LaRose can help us answer those questions, or myself and the rest of the team at ARPC can help us out. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Okay, awesome. So this first screen right here is what every member will see, right? So just like in the VPC, there was a member role. This is kind of my member page, and it will automatically default when you log into myEval to this kind of member page. And we'll come back to this page here in a little bit. Most importantly, if you're a CSS or you're an MPF, you want to toggle over the My Apps, and you'll see the different roles that you have assigned to you. Now, these roles should have flowed from the VPC if you previously had them. There was kind of a banner out there saying that they had some role issues where they didn't always flow. But if you have the right role, if you toggle over My Apps, you should see more than just chatter. You should see the myEval administration. Okay, just as a side note, under this helpful links, you do have the myFSS training library, which I use a lot. All of the micro videos and the job aids that are out there currently for myEval and myDecks are all under this FSS training library. So I used it the other day to help me pull a report. So that definitely did work. So that's all under the FSS training library. So if you go to My Apps and you go to My Eval Administration, of course, it was not this slow earlier today, but here we go. All right, so this page is another default page. So once it fully loads, the tabs that are on top here can actually be moved around. So my suggestion would be to have it in this exact order. So you can drag these and move these over anywhere you want to. My suggestion, which helps me keep things in line, is to put the personnel tab first, the review period second, and then the performance review tab third. Okay, so the reason being is this is all the personnel within your passcode that you'll be looking at. And then the review period is the actual start. Let me zoom in here just so you guys can hopefully see this better. The review period is the actual start date, and the end date, like the for each SCOD, for each rank that's out there. That's the review period. And then the performance review would either be the midterm feedback or the actual evaluation. So if I click on the personnel tab, now I've pinned all personnel here. This tab here, when you click on personnel, it automatically will default to recently viewed. So definitely go ahead and pin all personnel, because it does get confusing when you go back to search for another member and then they don't populate. It's only because you haven't switched this view to the all personnel, and more than likely you're still on like the recently viewed personnel. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to do, now that we've watched the 101 video, we know how we have to make sure MilPDS is accurate. Is that data flow should happen. So the first example that I'm going to give you is how to activate feedback when the data actually flowed appropriately from MilPDS. So as a CSS or as an MPF, this is exactly the steps that you would do to activate midterm feedback or an evaluation. So on this search list on the right, I don't search up here. I get confused when I search up on the very, very top, and it brings me to like a whole nother record, another land. So I just like staying in this land right here. So I go ahead and search the member that I want to initiate midterm feedback on. Okay, I'm going to scroll down quickly on this record just so there's no PII there. Okay. So when I open this member's record, the first block that I want to go into is the myEval block. Now you can see under myEval that the rater and the additional rater has already loaded, right? That's because it flowed appropriately from MilPDS, because I've already done my updates. Okay, so that's in there. Everything is perfect. I'm going to scroll down to the actual review period. So the review period also flowed. The review period is the start date and the end date for the appropriate SCOD, right? So this person's a DSG because that review period is 2 years long, right? If that person was an AGR, it would be only 1 year long, okay? So now I see the review period has flowed appropriately. I'm going to click on that member's record, on that name, and I'm going to now do a new performance review because I'm going to activate midterm feedback. So when I click on the record type, there's feedback, evaluation for enlisted and officer. This is a midterm feedback, right? This is formally known as the ACA. It's a 931 for his rank. I'm going to select midterm feedback and I'm going to go ahead and activate it. And when I click next, if every single member in the rating chain has logged in, everything's good, now that feedback, midterm feedback has been activated because I can see it here on the performance review. So I'm going to ask if there's any questions for each section. I'm going to do another activating of feedback and show you how simple it is. So just like in the VPC, when we would go in and kind of, even though we weren't doing anything in the VPC for ACAs back, a few months ago, it is awesome because now we're ensuring that all of our members are really getting the feedback that they need. So in order for you to activate an evaluation, that feedback first has to be activated and in there. So myEval will recognize if that member never had feedback before. So even though right now, as we move along, if you're a CSS or, an MPF representative, you can start to slowly activate your people for midterm feedback as you move along through the different ranks for the SCOD dates. So it's not so overwhelming if you're moving along with the SCOD dates. Here at the 105th, we have Wednesdays where we kind of do that together. So we have elevated CSSs to help along with MPF representatives. Sometimes we bring in DSGs and we have everyone help activate the feedback for that particular SCOD date. So that's just kind of a suggestion that you can do. So I'm going to go ahead and activate a midterm feedback for another member. So I'm going to go back into my little area here in my search, and I'm going to search for another member. So I click on his name, scroll down to the myEval section. I see that their raters have flowed from MilPDS, so I'm good there. And I'm going to scroll down to the review period. And I could see that it also flowed from MilPDS. He's also a DSG, so sweet. So that's good to go. I'm just going to click on his name, click on a new performance review. It is enlisted feedback. It's a 931 because he's a staff. I'm going to go ahead and put midterm feedback and I'm going to activate it. This is the way you would do it also for initial feedback. And on those 101 slides, Sergeant LaRose spoke, had several slides on the different scenarios where you would have initial feedback. So definitely take a look at those slides because those are very helpful. So that's it. Obviously, there are some glitches in the system, and I'm kind of glad that this happened. Every once in a while, we'll get one of these, oops, something went wrong. This could be for the fact that no one in that rating chain potentially has logged in or has an active account. Maybe the member hasn't logged in yet. So that would be more than likely where I would go to next. Just make sure that that member had an active account. So I want to go into the next example where it would show if MilPDS did not actually flow and you have to manually add it. Are there any questions for that section or anything that I can review for anyone, just solely on that record and activating midterm feedback? Are there any questions? No? Okay, so I'm going to move on. I'm going to move on to now what happens if you go in and you search for a member that you want to activate feedback for. So I'm going to click on his record and I'm going to scroll all the way down to myEval, right? And if you notice, the rater and the additional rater did not flow from MilPDS. Right? So what do we do? Well, it looks like here that they put these really cool little pens and pencils that say edit rater. So you would think that you could click on that to edit the rater, but you actually can't. It won't work. I've tried multiple times. So the only way that you can assign a rater on this member's record at this time would be to always go to the upper right-hand corner and assign evaluation personnel. Now, I will say that if you are manually adding the rater and the additional rater in this screen, make sure that you complete the entire process, meaning like either activate the evaluation or activate the midterm feedback, because the next data flow from MilPDS, if that information is wrong or blank, it's going to flow incorrect. It's going to kind of erase what you just did. So you're like double doing, which is why if you go in here and you don't see the rater or the additional rater, my first suggestion would be go ahead and update it in MilPDS first and let it flow. But if for some reason you really got to get it done and you have to take care of it at this time, then you can go ahead and add in the raters and the additional raters manually. Okay, so for this individual, they kind of trick us here. They end up doing first name first. I'm going to go ahead and search for the rater. Now, if they have a pretty popular last name, you can put in their email here and then click search. So this member's rater has populated. I'm going to, when I click select, I'm just going to ensure that their name you could see right here as the selected member. So it definitely selected that member for me. And at the same time, to save some time, I'm going to go ahead and manually add the additional rater at this time. Okay. And you'll see that here, the member populated. Just a little side note, these blocks, when you go to search, sometimes you'll click search and there'll be a bunch of names listed below. Just scroll down, because I sat here for like 10 minutes one time, like, hey, what's happening? And I realized I just had to scroll down and all the names were listed below. So now I know I selected, I definitely did select, because her name is right here saying that I selected that additional rater. And then I'm going to click next on the bottom. And now you'll notice under the myEval tab that their rater and additional rater has been loaded, right? Perfect. So now I'm going to scroll down. We already know that the data flow didn't happen from MilPDS. So now the next thing I want to add is my review period, right? I kept these tabs up here to kind of remind me. So review period is next. So I'm going to click on review period here on the very, remember I said, like, just keep going up to the right. That's where most of the stuff works. Try not to add or mess around too much with these, because I end up getting a lot of data collisions there and errors. So new review period. Now the start date will be the same. The projected supervision begin date will be the start date of that SCOD, that review period for that rank. Okay. So for this member, they also tricked us here. So it has to be month first. That would be the normal the start date for that evaluation for that rank of staff sergeant. So those two dates are going to match. I'm going to put in the closeout date, which would be the typical closeout date. And Sergeant LaRose gave us that really great tip with if it's an even rank or even grade, you're going to have an even year that it closes out for DSGs. And if it is an odd time frame. All right, so the start date, February 1st, 2021. And then we're going to go to the static closeout date for that rank. So for the staff sergeants, so we'll go ahead and do the next one. So we were saying with the even grades, it's even years, and then the static closeout for the odd grades would all be odd years. So for staff sergeant, the next closeout should be 2023. So I'll go ahead and put in January 30th, 2023. Okay, and then I'm going to click next. So again, user must be assigned to personnel record. That means that when I try to add this review period manually, that the member doesn't have an active account. So this is great because you'll actually see how sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. And you'll just have to continue trekking along, doing the best you can and communicating with the supervisors and the members on your installation. You can go ahead and pull reports. I use that report feature under the myFSS library on how to show active records. So before our drill weekends, our RSDs, I send out an active user listing just to make sure that the first sergeants, the commanders, and the CSSs know who has logged in and who hasn't. So as you can see, if they're not logging in, this can hinder what we're doing and our processes. So I just mark it off and kind of move right on. I don't even stress it too much because at this point, I just move on to the next one. Are there any questions so far? I'm going to give you another example on how to add manually so you can see. I'm going to do one more example here. So I go ahead and click on the name. I'm going to scroll down and you can see there's no rater or additional rater. The information did not flow from MilPDS. So I'm going to use my upper right hand side is my friend and I'm going to assign evaluation personnel for this member. Okay, so I'm going to select the rater. And you can see I selected it because it says selected member right here. And I'm going to add the additional rater. Now, keep in mind, I've been lucky, only one name has populated. But just like in the VPC, when you kind of searched for a name, sometimes you would get, across the Air National Guard or across the Air Force, you might get a list of 20 or 30 names. So just keep that in mind. So I selected the rater and the additional rater. It's in there, perfect. Now I'm going to try to assign the new review period. And it's going to be the same dates because this member is a staff sergeant as well. So, and I get these dates again from the static closeout dates for their respective ranks. And let's see if this one works. And successful. So now I have that review period, right? So now if I were to go into this record, now we're back from example 1, right? Almost as if it flowed from MilPDS, right? We just manually added it, but this is what it looks like if it actually flows. So now I go ahead and click on their name now that I manually built that review period, and I'm gonna go ahead and activate midterm feedback. So enlisted feedback, midterm, and active. Cross our fingers. And it's good. So we just went ahead and you could tell that you activated it because the performance review is in here. So what happens after you activate midterm feedback, right? All right, I just activated midterm feedback or I activated an evaluation. Now the member will log in and there's multiple tabs that are here on this first page, right? So just like in the VPC, how you could, or there were roles assigned where you could have member, H3 access, or MPF access, or your CSS access. So I go into my actions. So me as a member, my CSS activated my feedback, my midterm feedback, and it populated under my tab for my action. Okay. Just as a side note, you'll see the senior rater listed. Don't worry, it doesn't mean that my commander, my wing commander, the general is not looking at any of these midterm feedbacks. It's just listed as her being our senior rater for the base. Okay, it doesn't mean it's getting routed to her. So my rater was listed, my midterm feedback was activated. Now I've already done my initial feedback. So this button here will show initial feedback. When I click on that, or I'm going to go in and answer my questions just like I did for the ACA, kind of similar. I'm going to answer those. There's certain amount of characters that I can input. And then when I'm done putting in my thoughts on my performance, I go ahead and click submit. At that time, my rater gets an email and gets pinged, right? So now this is my ratee. This is just an example of what the rater actions look like, right? So now, my airman completed her midterm feedback and then it came back to me. So now I'm going to view her feedback, put in my responses, and then the two of us will certify and digitally sign that we had face-to-face feedback. And then the same thing will happen for evaluations. So when the CSS will activate the evaluations, so it's not a lot of work because we were doing this already in the VPC. We were already going in, creating shells if they didn't drop from MilPDS, right? We were manually creating a shell, and then we were forwarding it to the rater and kind of tracking where it went. All of that was happening already in the VPC. So this kind of mirrors that. Really, the only thing additional that we're going to be doing is going to be activating the ACAs, or formerly known as the ACA. So activating the feedback. And in essence, that we are getting what we asked for, right? So we are giving our airmen the opportunity for feedback so that, so that they can have a better performance and have more of a mentor-mentee type situation. So that is my eval in a nutshell. I do want to turn it over to see if Sergeant LaRose has anything to add. I was the MPF perspective. Sergeant LaRose and I have been training our CSSs together, and she's kind of been instrumental in my success in anything that I've done on the FSS front as a MPF representative. So if you guys now have any questions, or actually, Sergeant LaRose, is there anything that you want to add?
No, I think you got that all pretty comprehensive. I've been trying to answer questions as they've been coming up. And, if I have the answer for you, remember that we are out in the field just like you, learning as we go. And so we have some of the answers, but we don't have all of them. I see a lot of people asking about, we can see people that are outside of our passcode or people that don't have access. Those are things that you'll want to look at with your PSM or HRDSA to make sure that you have the right passcodes assigned. That will be your first step. And again, if you're continuing to have problems, I suggest you submit a question into the myEval help desk.
Hi, this is Chief Bush. I have a question. I have my hand up. Is it okay to ask now?
Of course, Chief.
So remember the example you gave where you got the error message and you said this means that the rating chain isn't there. Can we go back to that one?
Sure thing.
Because I know you said don't mess around down where it says rating, but I get that same error message on pretty much everybody and I can't do anything, even though they're in the rating chain. So when I go down to the rating, if I start, up one right there on the rating period.
On the review, the review period, ma'am?
Yes. If I click there and then start new, I get to the same screen that you did, and I never have issues doing it this way. Is that a problem? And then can I continue to do it this way?
So when we were manually adding these review periods, the only other issue that I saw was that, and Sergeant LaRose can probably speak to it more because this happened a lot, but it gives you a duplicate review period. So that when it actually does flow from MilPDS, Sergeant LaRose, do you want to add anything to that on what does it, it ended up causing an issue for you, didn't it? Or no? No, it was okay. Yes, ma'am. So if we want, I can try adding right now and we can see what happens. So we'll put in.
It's the same as you doing it like you did before. You're just choosing all those same screens. There are a ton of screens on here, which is part of my second question. I know we don't have to fill them all out, but why? What are they for? Like all these drop-down menus?
Yeah, I don't know if ARPC would like to, add anything to that. There's usually more than one way to go into a lot of different things. So we've just been messing around and what works for us. So from the field perspective, I'm just trying to share where we've been the most successful. And it seems like the way that we just showed you was the most successful. But in the background here, I'm going to go ahead and try to manually add the review period and see what happens if we get that same error. Okay. But while I do this, if there's another question.
Can I answer some of that?
Sure.
This is Jeremy. So when you create this review period, it's not pulling from the personnel review period. So all the open tabs you have to manually fill in. So the rating pass, number of days, all those things are pulled from that personnel's or that purple tab that you're creating that in. So doing it this way, you're having to manually do all those things that are automatically generated through the other way.
Okay, that makes sense. But the other way, I'm telling you, every time I try to do it the other way on the other screen, and I'm MPF, right? I always get an error message that says I'm not allowed to do it. So, and I was trying to do all these before the system started populating them themselves, right? So I'm learning now that even though a review period's created and it says canceled, I can actually manipulate that and move it from canceled back to an active review period. From just playing around in there, I learned that. I'll say one more thing because this is my real question. Chief EPRs close the end of this month. Are we going to have a training on what MPFs, since we're going to be the final reviewer, are we going to have a training on what that looks like for us to actually close out an EPR?
Chief Bush, I am so glad you asked that. It's Chief Modoc. I want to hesitantly say yes, but it will not be before the closeout. So I had actually asked the 105th that once they get there, because we're trying to actually get mine going as well here at the ARPC, and we're having bugs too. So, I'm just being very transparent. But I asked them that they take any screenshots they can as they go along, because they've got Sergeant LaRose. I think you had one really close to the finish line.
Yes, Chief, we have our chiefs all set and ready to go. Right now, it's just waiting for the static closeout date and going through signatures. So hopefully I have that one figured out and we will use my chief for the example.
Awesome, thank you. And I think what we'll try to do, if we're ready, we will try to have that as well on the 15 June training, if we can get there, everyone. I don't want to make a promise that I can't keep, but we are trying to get that for you, yes.
One of the other questions I'm seeing on the chat is that you don't have all the tabs that Master Sergeant Durkins has at the top. So I'm going to have her follow along on her screen, but if you're missing those tabs, they're really easy to add. If you go all the way to the right-hand side of that section and follow her mouse, there's a little pen. If you click there, that'll allow you to add more tabs to the top. So if you have something you want, you can search all of them, add what's important to you. The three most important ones are that personnel tab, the performance review, and then the review periods. So as long as you have those three, you're at a basic start. Look through the others and see what is pertinent to you.
Chief, it did work when we tried to manually add that. So it's in there, but it's automatically doing like a duplicate application. But if that happens, you could always go in and you can delete. Sometimes the delete works, sometimes the delete doesn't. Delete that performance review. And yep, performance review midterm was deleted. So now, you know, if you have duplicates in there, you can go ahead and delete the one. Just make sure you're not deleting one that's already kind of in the works if someone has already coordinated on it.
Chief Modoc, I see a lot of questions about who will be closing out the evaluations, the CSS
Yeah,
or...
I just noticed that. I was going to jump in here. Hey, you guys, we're not telling you how you run your FSS or your CSS. Whoever has the privilege, so however, y'all need to have a real honest conversation in your wings, or however you're structured on how you're going to do that. So we can't tell you black and white, this is what you're doing. What we can tell you is whoever has access to the elevated role will be able to do so. And once we're able to provide a little bit more training on what that looks like, we will absolutely do so. So I hope that kind of clears that up for everyone. I'll watch the chat further.
I think one thing at the 105th that I was kind of just thinking in the top of my head, how would we, because obviously one person at the MPF level would be super difficult to have to review and do all of that, one person at the MPF level. So my thought was assigning potentially, you know, as a group, each group would have an elevated CSS. And then at the end of every SCOD date, we would have kind of a party, you know, and we would call in some DSGs and we would have maybe, you know, 7 people that were there just going ahead and helping each squadron together as a team, whatever that entails. And again, just like the chief said, we don't know what that entails yet, but going ahead and potentially doing it together and just closing out, reviewing, and getting it done basically in one day for those static closeout dates.
I see a question in the chat that says, what if my roles did not flow from VPC? I contacted my MPF and they are not able to establish my roles either. I have my eval admin, but I am not able to see my unit plus my subordinate units. The first thing I would say is to make sure that when you're searching that you're looking under all personnel and not under recently reviewed. Check your roles. Sergeant Durkins, maybe you could walk through showing them how to check what passcodes are assigned in their role. Or you can look at your own.
That tab is no longer there. So I would say then get with your HRDSA. So we used to have a tab up here where you could actually view your role assignment. That tab is no longer there. I'm not sure what happened to it. I know Sergeant LaRose is going to have that. Yes.
Hey, it's Jeremy.
Yes.
Go to the far left and click on the little balls over there on the side and click on myEval.
Oh, on my roles. Okay, I'll click on myEval again.
Yep, click on the myEval. And it should populate all those tabs.
So it still doesn't have the roles. And then when I try to add it here, the roles doesn't populate. I'll try it one more time, but.
Hi,
Yeah.
this is Steph from Broadshire. I'm the one that asked the question. So, what is the HRDSA?
So the HRDSA is the PSM at the base. So they kind of have, just like in the VPC, where the PSM would have to assign those roles, like, the commander role, and then any of the CSS roles. It's the same thing in myEval. The PSM or the HRDSA, now known, in this system, it's the HRDSA, would have to assign those roles for everybody.
What if they don't have the access to do that? Because mine doesn't, and that's why I can't get my roles established correctly.
Yep. Well, they can submit a ticket, and there is like the PSM SharePoint page. There's been PSM chat back and forth on how to do that. It did take, I could say it took about 2 months for my PSM to get the access, but once they do, you guys should have kind of smooth sailing from that point. But yeah, it has to be, you'll have to submit a ticket, and it was instructions on like the PSM page. And he can also reach out via email, send out a group message maybe to the PSMs to say, and maybe there's another PSM that can help them and point him in the right direction to get the access.
Hey, ma'am, this is PSM here, Brian La Rochelle at Dover. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you,
Yes.
sir.
Okay, PSM here. I'm here to tell you that most PSMs in the command, and I'm speaking for Air Force Reserve, are broke. We do not have access to assign roles. It's a problem that they're working on right now. They cannot give us a get well date. So we're all in the same boat here. I cannot see roles. I can't assign roles. And we've been told by A1RI that there's nothing they can do about it. And if you do have some PSMs that have been fixed, I'd really like to know who they are and what they did.
Sir, if you want to send me your name, I'll forward your name to my PSM, and I'll give you the address or the email org box that he sent for his access, and that might be helpful. Additionally, there was a job aid for the PSMs that I happened to look at, and he couldn't assign roles for like over a month, even though he had the access. And it turned out, once I actually listened and watched the job aid, that we were doing it completely wrong. So we were selecting drop down, hitting myEval, but you have to hit the drop down and choose general. If you choose general, you'll be able to view and assign commander roles and elevated CSS roles. So I don't know if that was an issue, but that's on the job aid.
Well, we followed the job aid and it didn't work. And I did this with the command PSM, Senior Master Sergeant Renfro. However, you're shedding a new light on this, and I'll certainly go back to that job aid and choose that other drop down to see if that makes a difference.
Yeah, it immediately worked for us. I went right over to him. I'm like, look, we've been actually, it would make sense that you would select myEval. So we didn't even look, and we just selected myEval. I'm like, holy smokes, we've been doing this wrong the whole time. We have to choose general. So that was a big thing for us.
Okay.
I hope it works for you, sir.
Hey,
Thank you.
Brian.
Yeah.
Hey, this is Jeremy. Are you able to see your passcodes you said, or you're not?
I'm not.
Okay, so are you with the 512-4 support squadron?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so I'm able to search your passcodes under roles and routing, and I can see you have elevated CSS, and then everything underneath there, command support staff for T4 OMFJTQ, SOX, and things like that. So your roles are in here. Same thing with unit commander for those two passcodes.
Right. That's what flowed over from VPC.
Okay. So do you guys know how to view the different roles
I'm paused
in
right now.
myEval?
Yes. And
Okay.
it's just not working.
Don't stress about it. He said he can do it tomorrow, but I didn't know if
Okay.
it was quick for you to do or not.
And I'm hearing that all the other PSMs that we talked about this in our own little chat, and we're all having the same problem. And we're being told that it's a known issue and they're working on it.
So next month's training is going to be a little bit more in depth on roles and routing definitions with Mr. Shearer. So I think that we do know like that there are still glitches that are happening. And the only thing I could say is try to work with each other or reach out to to ARPC with a ticket explaining your issue with the roles if you don't see the appropriate roles populating at this time. But bottom line, if you are an MPF and you are a CSS, what can you be doing if like your roles aren't working out and you're still waiting? It doesn't mean that it's at a standstill. There's so much stuff that can be done in the background to set you up for success when you actually do get those roles. So if you are ensuring that all your data is accurate, that your raters are correct, that they're all listed in MilPDS, that your SCOD dates are on point, using our slides, that everything is good. Then when you actually do get your roles, it should be smooth sailing from there for the most part for you to be able to activate any of your members for their feedback. So I know this training today has been, quite some time between the retirement portion and here. And I don't want to cut any of the evaluation portion short, but if there are any other questions or anything that I can show again, that I can explain, or if you have just regular questions about how we manage this throughout this time frame, I'm be more than happy to help. Feel free to turn your mic on and ask the question. And if we don't get any more, then I'm just going to turn it back over to the chief.
Hey, quick question for the Afric PSMs, is I think I'm on when Senior Renfro sends things out, and obviously for my guard people on, we would get that from NGBA1Q. For the reserve, do you guys have a separate PSM email file where y'all email stuff and help each other across your community? Because I know the guard does.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, because I'm not on that one, so obviously I'm not seeing that chatter. But maybe once, if you would check that, and I'm sorry, I cannot see who I'm talking to.
Rochelle.
Rochelle. Oh, I think you comment on our social media, don't you, quite a bit?
Right.
Okay. When you see if that works for you, would you mind just maybe helping spread the word? Like I said earlier, all hands on deck. So if that ends up working for you, would you help touch point those people that are also having maybe the same issue? And then Sergeant Wright, I know you put a comment in here. There was a known, I'm sorry, it's so many comments up. I'm trying to find it. Where is it at? Sergeant Wright is here at ARPC, and I know she's in the background trying to help some of you off to the side. Dang it, where is it at? Something about there's a known issue and A1H is working it, so we need to stand by, but I don't know specifically what that was in regards to, and now I can't even find the comment. Did anybody know?
Yes, Chief.
Okay,
So there's a known bug that's allowing specifically PSMs and maybe MPF management roles to see all personnel. So just stand by on that. A1H is aware and they're working the issue.
Okay, thank you. That was a little bit different than what we were just talking about. Okay, thank you. So that goes to all the people that keep saying, hey, I see all these different people. Okay. All right. So I don't think we have anything else. 105, thank you so much. Jeremy, thanks for coming on a couple times as well. We'll get you and Sergeant Basason on deck for next month, and your recording as well for like the evaluations kind of 201. Sergeant Basason is going to go in depth on some officer information, officer SCOD. So everyone, please stand by for that. And then Mr. Shearer, he's going to go all into some of the other 201 type issues and questions that you guys have had. So please stand by. We're all just going to keep helping each other and work through this together. Unless anyone else has anything for the training, I will pause just for a moment. Feel free to come off your mic while we have the captive audience. Okay, hearing nothing, I'm going to go ahead and end this training. Thank you for your attendance, and we'll see y'all on the 15th of June, if not sooner.